My goodness, it has been a heck of a year. I'm Frederick Middlebrooks. This is the Greatest Asset Community Podcast. We're going to get straight on into it. We're talking in this episode about things that have transpired throughout 2023 in the real estate and mortgage industry. So sort of a review, if you will, of the last 12 months of the real estate and mortgage industry, as well as talking a little bit about is now a good time for you to still jump into the housing market. I'm not going to be discussing as much on what we foresee coming up in the future of the real estate and mortgage industries in terms of in 2024, because that's going to be for next episode. So make sure you stay tuned to listen to next week's episode so that you can know a little bit more about what all the real estate and mortgage professionals are talking about we expect to happen in 2024 for the real estate and mortgage industry. So jumping on into it, for this year in 2023, we saw higher interest rates. Interest rates actually started increasing in 2022 after the historic lows that we experienced in 2020 and 2021. And they continued to increase throughout 2023 as the Federal Reserve continued to just keep the gas on raising the Federal Reserve rate. And we know that's not directly tied to mortgage rates. However, there is a indirect relationship that happens where it does affect the rates that we see on the mortgage side of things as well. So we saw interest rates continuing to increase throughout 2023. We saw inflation continuing to increase throughout 2023. And inflation actually started during the pandemic when we saw something to the tune of more than $4 trillion that was just printed up and sent out to the American people in the form of stimulus checks to help stimulate the economy and everything like that. Well, the thing is that has an effect on the economy. We didn't feel that effect in 2020 and 2021 because it was artificially being created to keep everything low. In essence, we had money that was being printed, and then, people had money in their bank accounts. We had the government that was buying up mortgage-backed securities, and that was artificially keeping interest rates low. So there was a lot of stuff that we were shielded from, which was actually being created during the pandemic. However, in 2022, when the government eased back off of buying these mortgage-backed securities and the Federal Reserve started raising these interest rates, now we started to feel the effects of the decisions that we made in 2020 and 2021 with keeping the Federal Reserve rate low, essentially at zero for far too long, in addition to everything else that the government was doing to try and just keep the economy propped up. Well, we started feeling those effects in 2022. And then it carried on into 2023 through this year as well. So it's been a rocky year, so to speak, for a lot of individuals, not just people that are looking to purchase homes, but also us on the mortgage side of things as well. We've seen a huge decrease in the mortgage industry and in the real estate industry as well. There have been more than half of real estate agents that have stepped back from the mortgage industry there have been half of real estate agents that have stepped back from the real estate industry, and the same thing with loan officers that have stepped back from the mortgage industry and decided to go and seek other jobs, other forms of employment. And that's because business on the mortgage side of things has become very difficult to obtain. There is a smaller pool of business out there for the real estate and mortgage industries. And so because of that, you've seen, again, more than half of agents on the real estate side and more than half of loan officers on the mortgage side that have left the industry. You've seen a closing of doors for many mortgage companies, a lot of other companies getting bought by bigger companies. So you've seen the mortgage industry shrinking. You've seen the same thing on the real estate side as well. So that's something that's happened. And a lot of the shortage of business in these industries is partially due to the fact that inventory is low. So again, throughout 2023, we saw a lot less inventory than what we were used to maybe 10 years before that, 15 years before that. So we've had low inventory for a while now. This actually started shortly after the 2008 Great Recession because home builders were not building as many homes anymore as the number of housing starts or families that were being started that needed homes. And so because of that, we've had fewer homes being built than the number of families that were being started that needed homes. And you continue that on for enough years and you end up in where we are today with an inventory shortage. And so because of that inventory shortage, coupled with higher interest rates, which means that people were pulling back from wanting to purchase homes and everything, you just had a lot less business in the mortgage and real estate industries. And therefore, a lot of people working in those industries found it a lot harder to make the checks that they needed to make in order to survive and, cover their daily expenses and everything. So that was something that we also saw occurring throughout 2023. And with the inventory shortage, obviously we have home prices that were continuing to rise as well. So home prices were rising throughout the pandemic. And in 2022, interest rates started increasing. We saw a slight decrease in home prices because, it was only natural when you had such a huge pullback from the demand of buyers wanting to purchase once these interest rates started creeping up. So we saw a slight pullback in some of the home prices, but again, you had such a huge run up in 2020, 2021 that even a little give back, those who own homes were still well up over where they historically would have been if homes were appreciating at average appreciation percentages. And so because of that, you saw that little decrease, but then home prices kind of plateaued or flattened out a little bit and then started back on their upward trend again. So that's what we saw continuing in 2023. We still have appreciation, not depreciation in home prices. So home prices are still going up throughout 2023 as well. And again, not going to get too much into the predictions because that's going to be in the next episode for next week. But I will say that that's going to be the trend for quite some time into the foreseeable future. But that's what we saw throughout this year as well with 2023 and home prices just continuing to rise as well. So we also saw lawsuits happening. There was a big class action lawsuit in Missouri that reached a verdict by the jury. It had to be signed off on by the judge as well. But in essence, the National Association of Realtors, which is the large organization that many real estate agents belong to, and they do a lot to help not only the real estate industry, but also the general public that wants to become homeowners and looking out for the best interest of the general public as well. And I will say, full disclosure, I am a member of the National Association of Realtors as well. However, we saw a class action lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors, Keller Williams, Home Services of America, which is owned by Berkshire Hathaway. And I'm not going to get too much into the weeds of what that lawsuit entailed because I put out a podcast episode, I believe it was released on November 1st, that was talking about, could this be something that would affect the real estate industry? And so if you want to know more about that lawsuit, go back, listen to that podcast, and it'll give you more details on what all was happening with that lawsuit and kind of what the fallout could be based on that lawsuit and everything like that. But after that lawsuit happened, we started to see additional lawsuits against the real estate industry happen in other states, including Georgia, which is where I'm at as well. And so that's something that's kind of been moving the ground a little bit, or at least raising some eyebrows for people who are in those industries, as well as people who are outside of those industries, but wondering how this might affect the real estate industry, depending upon how this thing goes, to the left or the right, still to be determined because these lawsuits are still outstanding right now. However, that's something that also has been happening in 2023. And so 2023 has been quite a year for the mortgage and real estate industries. If you work in these industries, as I do in the mortgage industry, it has been a tough year. But it has been a really good year for those who have been hard chargers and been wanting to grind it out. And I believe that that will pay off in the future, because the real estate in mortgage industry. It's a cyclical industry, so it has its highs and its lows, and that's just been the nature of the industry. However, I do believe that it is a very resilient industry, and in the future we will see, in the near future actually, I don't even think it's going to be that far from now, that long from now, we will see sort of a leveling out of things, more certainty being brought to the industry. People aren't going to be as anxious or as uncertain about what's going on in the market, and I think you're going to see a return to normalcy, so to speak, a new type of norm, but still something that you can feel a little bit more secure about in those industries. So moving on from there, we are going to discuss a little bit about what we're seeing right now and if it's still a good time for you to jump into the housing market and purchase a home. So what we're seeing right now, as of about a week ago to maybe 2 weeks ago, we started seeing a decline in the interest rates. A lot of this is because the Federal Reserve announced that they were not looking to continue to hike interest rates right now. And so because of that, a lot of mortgage investors or investors that invest in mortgage-backed securities, which has a lot to do with what the interest rates are, feel a little bit more, they feel a little bit better about where we're at in the mortgage industry, at least compared to where we were when the Federal Reserve was just constantly hiking rates, hiking rates, hiking rates. And so because of that, you've seen a little bit of breather, a little bit of a decline in the mortgage industries, the mortgage rates, or the interest rates rather, in the mortgage industry. And so that's been a good thing that we've seen as well. But does that mean that it makes it a good time for you to buy? So my big thing is whether or not it's a good time for you to buy should have little to do with the interest rates. It should have little to do with home prices. It should have little to do with what's going on in the economy, but it should have everything to do, or at least the majority to do, with how long you plan on owning that home. So if you plan on staying in this home for long enough to make it worth it for you to pay all the costs that you're going to have to pay up front for this home, we're talking the closing costs, which include your origination fees, attorney fees, doc prep fees, but we're also talking about costs such as your taxes that you're going to have to pay, insurance that you're going to have to pay, and then all the interest that you're going to pay, which if you've ever purchased a home and looked at an amortization schedule, most of your payment is interest that you're paying for that first decade of owning that home, even more than a decade. You're paying mostly interest for those payments. And so whether or not owning a home is worth it depends upon whether or not the appreciation of that home combined with the principal that you're paying on that home and how much you put down on that home, which is the equity that you would start with the down payment and everything, if that's going to outpace how much you're actually spending to own that home. So that all has to deal with, do you plan on being in this home or at least owning this home for long enough to make it worth it? Now, that's going to depend based on how much the home is that you purchase, what the interest rate is of that home, how much you put down. And these are things that a good loan officer can draw up the numbers for you and tell you, yep, you're owning this home for at least 4 years or 5 years. It's going to make it worth it for you to purchase this home. Or nope, you plan on leaving in 2 to 3 years, you're better off renting. So whether or not it's going to be a good time for you to purchase a home, first and foremost, and most importantly, should have to do with how long do you plan on owning this home? Even if you're only going to live in it for 2 years, but if you plan on owning it for 10 years, it could still be a good purchase for you because you're still going to have that same mortgage, assuming you don't refinance. And if you did refinance, you're probably going to refinance into a better rate and term for you. That's going to make your payment even lower, hopefully. And so with that, you should first and most importantly consider how long you are going to be staying in that home. Also, with whether or not it's a good time for you to purchase or not, you're also going to want to look at the inventory shortage that we have right now in terms of deciding whether now is a good time or whether you should wait, considering that interest rates have dropped a little bit, and maybe you're thinking that we're going to be seeing a further decrease in interest rates. Again, stay tuned for next week's episode, because we're going to talk more about that and a lot of other things that we're predicting or projecting to see next year as well. But you might be wondering, should I wait till next year or should I purchase now? So just to give you a little bit of history, real estate very much operates on a supply and demand schedule. And so what that means is that when you have high demand and low supply, home prices are going to rise, and vice versa. Well, as we stated earlier, we are in an inventory shortage, so our supply is low. Now, demand was really high during the pandemic when we had super low interest rates. However, demand has since tapered a little bit with interest rates going up, but now we're starting to see interest rates slightly come down again. As we have the last week or two, we've seen interest rates start to come down a little bit. So what's that going to do with the demand? When you have interest rates start to come down, people are going to be able to purchase homes now. There are millions of more people nationwide that with every 1% drop in interest rates, now they are able to afford a home when previously they were not able to afford a home. Maybe they were just outside of that debt to income ratio mix where they weren't able to afford a home because of where interest rates were at when they were flying at 8%. But maybe when interest rates came down to 7%, now they can afford to purchase. Or maybe when they go from 7 to 6, now they can afford to purchase. So what's important about that is if you were one of the people who could actually afford a home when interest rates were at 8%, but you didn't buy and you waited until interest rates came down to 7%, now there's even more people that can afford a home. So with the low inventory, meaning that small percentage of homes that we actually have that are available for you to purchase, now there are even more people fighting for those homes at 7% than what we're fighting for those homes at 8%. And when interest rates fall to 6%, there are going to be even more people fighting for the little bit of homes out there at 6% than how many people are fighting for them at 7%, because every time the interest rates drop, there are more people that can qualify for those homes. Also, the people that could qualify for those homes at maybe the 7 or 8% interest rates, maybe they just backed away because they were scared because of the high interest rates. But now that they see interest rates coming back down, they decide to enter into the market as well. So now you have even more people that are vying for these homes at lower interest rates. What does that do to the demand? It pushes the demand higher. And as we just stated, when that demand goes high and the inventory or the supply is low, we're going to see increases in the home prices. What does that mean about right now with you purchasing a home? If now is a good time for you to purchase a home, meaning that you plan on living in that home for a long enough time to allow the money that you will make on that home to exceed the cost that you will pay in owning that home, including maintenance fees and everything else. And again, a good loan officer can calculate all that for you. But if you're going to be staying in that home long enough to actually make money on the sale of that home, vice losing money, then now would actually be a more advantageous time for you to purchase. Really, when interest rates were at 7 or 8%, it would have been more advantageous time because you would have had less competition. Another thing that comes with that competition is that sellers are not as willing to negotiate because you have what are called bidding wars. So with bidding wars, that's when you have multiple buyers all putting in offers for the same home. So you might have one home that, let's say, is for sale for $300,000, and you've got 6 buyers that all want it. So they're now all bidding, and the listing agent will tell you, yep, we've got multiple offers. So come with your highest and best offer by Sunday, come with your highest and best offer by Monday, or whatever that day is that they're going to be taking all the offers in. Well, you know, you have to come with your highest and best. Homes listed at 300,000. You're likely going to have to go above asking price because there are 6 other people or 5 other people or however many. I've seen bidding wars with over 100 people bidding on the same house. And that was this year in 2023. There was a home that was listed that had over 100 offers on it in 2023, and this was at 7.5%, 8% interest rates. So bidding wars is when you have multiple people all trying to bid for the same property. Now, again, when you have a lot of demand and low supply, couple that with interest rates that are decreasing, you're going to have more bidding wars. You're going to have more properties that are going to have multiple buyers trying to buy that property because it's not as many properties to choose from, and you want a home, and so does everybody else. So with those bidding wars, it's going to increase the home prices because that demand is picking up and the supply is still low. Now, you do have new constructions that are popping up all the time, but if home builders continue to build at a high rate, it would still take years for them to catch up with the shortage of inventory that we have right now. So because of that, you're going to see increased home prices, especially if interest rates continue to drop. And so if you're looking to purchase a home and you're thinking, yep, I plan on living in it for at least 5 years or 6 years or however long, that's going to make it worth it for me to live into, but maybe I should wait until interest rates drop down a little bit more. I suggest going ahead and purchasing the home now because it might be even harder if you were to wait, even though, yep, you could purchase more home when the interest rates do drop. However, you might also lose out on that home that you really want because a lot more people can now afford that home. A lot more people are now going to be bidding on that home when interest rates do drop. So that's something that you should definitely be thinking about and considering when you're wondering if now is the time for me to jump into the housing market, or I see things heading in the direction I want them to go in. Also, don't forget, you can also refinance that home later. That's a thing that where, let's say you purchased that home at a 7% or a 7.5% interest rate today, and then in the future, let's say a year from now, interest rates drop down to 5.5% or 6%, and you're like, oh man, I want to refinance and get that lower rate so I can lower my monthly payment. Well, you already have the home, so you're not fighting or in a bidding war with someone to try and get the home and having to overpay for the home. You already have the home, and so now you can just refinance into that lower rate, lower that monthly payment that you have on your home by refinancing rather than trying to get the home that you want in the midst of bidding back and forth with everyone else. And another thing I will say, when interest rates are higher and you have a little bit less demand, like we saw with the 8% interest rates, sellers are more willing to negotiate with you in terms of having seller concessions or seller contributions, things that they're willing to contribute to helping their home get sold. For example, there were sellers that were willing to pay for closing costs or pay half of the closing costs. There were sellers that were willing to negotiate on the purchase price of the home. There were sellers that were willing to buy down your interest rate so that you could actually have a lower interest rate to purchase this home and everything. So that's something that you see from sellers when the demand has come back a little bit, homes are sitting on the market a little bit longer, is that sellers are more willing to negotiate. However, if you're a home seller and you've got 10 people that want to purchase your property and they're all trying to put in high bids and everything, how willing are you to then say, you know what, I'm gonna drop the price of the home? It doesn't make sense because there are people that are willing to pay more than what you already have it offered for now. How willing are you to say, hey, I'm gonna pay closing costs? Not that willing, because there are people who, out of that pool of 10 or 20, however many people want your home, they're like, I'll pay all the closing costs and I'll pay above asking price. So you're going to take the highest and best offer that you can get for your home. And those typically come when interest rates are lower. But when interest rates are higher, generally sellers are more willing to negotiate. You don't have quite as many multiple offer, bidding way above asking price situations when interest rates are higher because the demand is not quite as strong. So when interest rates are what they have been over the last year and a half, 2 years, that's actually a good time to buy when everyone else is fearful. And that's actually a Warren Buffett thing as well. He says, be greedy when everyone is fearful. So when everyone was running away from the housing market because interest rates were high, that was actually a really good time to buy because you could actually have gotten a lot of seller concessions. You could have gotten a home without having to overpay for it and potentially been able to negotiate for the seller to pay for your closing costs, to pay for an interest rate buy down, or to drop the price of the home. And you could have allocated that money however you wanted to allocate that money. So that's something that just wanted to keep in the back of your mind in terms of whether or not now is a good time for you to be able to purchase a home. So we are still in that inventory shortage. Demand will continue to increase as interest rates rise, and just recapping a few of the things that we've discussed. And like I said, the likely outcome of the interest rates rising, or excuse me, the interest rates falling. So demand will continue to increase as interest rates continue to drop, and the likely outcome of those interest rates dropping and the increase in demand is that we will have more bidding wars and home prices will continue to increase as well. So take that as you will in terms of whether or not you want to act now or whether or not you want to wait. However, if you are currently not in a position to purchase right now, maybe you need to have some work done with your credit, or maybe you need to save money for down payment and closing costs. Start now getting that stuff done, because it's only going to benefit you later to be prepared to purchase a home when you're ready. So go ahead and start now. Talk with a loan officer, a good loan officer, and see what is it that I need to do to get my credit to where it needs to be so that I can purchase a home. How much do I need to save so that I have enough to cover down payment and closing costs? There are down payment assistance programs out there. However, you don't have to rely, if you don't have to rely on those programs and you can cover your down payment and closing costs, that could equate to you getting a better interest rate when it's time for you to purchase the home. So there are benefits to you covering your own closing costs rather than just using down payment assistance. However, if it comes down to you could purchase a home today with down payment assistance, or you would have to wait 6 or 10 months to save up the money for the down payment, then purchase the home today with the down payment assistance. That's what it's there for. And I believe, especially if you're going to be staying in that home long term, it's better for you to own the home today with the down payment assistance than waiting 6 or 10 months and not knowing what's going to happen with the market, and if you're even going to be able to get that home 6 to 10 months from now because of the bidding wars that we might be in and everything like that. So that's all I have for you. Thank you for taking the time to tune in. As always, please do like and subscribe to the podcast. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. It really does help me in terms of being able to bring more light or shed more light on some of the information that I'm trying to put out to really help people in their home ownership journey, really help them to be educated in making the best decisions for them. And only you can decide what's best for you. My job is to just educate you and bring you all of the information that's going to help you make that best decision, that's going to help you accomplish those home ownership and financial goals that you have. So please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Give this podcast a thumbs up if you found any information in it that were beneficial for you. And you can find me on Instagram and TikTok as well. I am GA Loan Officer, Greatest Asset Loan Officer, but GA Loan Officer on Instagram, GA Loan Officer on TikTok as well. So I put out videos on there as well throughout the week to just push out some information that might be helpful for individuals that are in the housing market or just want to improve your credit or anything like that. There's a lot of different information that's out there. That's good stuff. So thank you again for tuning in. Take care. Be blessed. We'll see you in the next episode.